So imagine this. For years, you live in a country where everything you read, everything you hear is strictly controlled.
Hmm.
And then almost overnight, all of those rules just disappear. We're going to look at the incredible and ultimately tragic story of the Prague Spring.
Right. It happened in 1968 in Czechoslovakia.
And it was this amazing brief moment where it felt like an entire nation could just rewrite its own future.
But to get why it was so explosive, you have to understand what came before. I mean, for years, Czechoslovakia was run by a really strict communist party.
Total control.
Total control. Censorship, not a lot of personal freedom, and the economy was just stuck. So people were frustrated. And that's the key. This wasn't just some political argument. It was this huge release of pent-up demand for change.
Okay, so every explosion needs a spark. What was it here?
The spark was a new leader. In January of '68, a man named Alexander Dubcek took over the Communist Party.
And he was different.
Very different. He knew the system was failing. So he came up with this idea, this really powerful phrase. He called it socialism with a human face.
A human face. That says so much. It implies the old way was inhuman.
Exactly. But it's important to know what that meant. He wasn't trying to get rid of socialism.
He wasn't trying to become like America or something.
No, not at all. The idea was to keep the socialist economic system, the focus on equality, but to add things that we might think of as democratic rights.
So freedom of speech, personal freedoms, that kind of thing.
That's it. He was basically trying to prove that communism didn't have to be so rigid and oppressive, that it could be, well, humane.
But to the Soviet Union, that must have sounded like he was tearing the whole system down.
Oh, absolutely. Because if the Communist Party doesn't have the only say, then everything is suddenly up for debate.
So how did people on the ground react? Was it immediate?
It was electric. Students, workers, writers, they saw this as permission to finally hope for something better, and they started speaking out right away.
So this idea is out there. How quickly did life actually change for the average person?
Almost instantly. And the biggest change was freedom of the press. The government just stopped censoring things.
Wow.
Yeah. Imagine waking up one day and you can actually read a newspaper that criticizes the government, or you can debate politics without being afraid the secret police will show up.
That must have been a floodgate opening.
It was. And it wasn't just politics. Artists and writers who had been banned for years suddenly started publishing their work again.
So the whole culture just came alive.
Completely. Cafes, universities, they all became these places for debate. It felt like a long, gray winter had finally ended, and everything was bursting with color and conversation.
And they were actually trying to change the rules of the whole game, right? Not just loosen them.
Precisely. The reformers wanted to allow other political groups to exist, not just the Communist Party.
There's real competition.
The idea was that more voices would lead to better decisions. I mean, that was a direct challenge to the one-party rule that the Soviet Union demanded everywhere else.
And what about for, say, a regular family? What were the changes that you could really feel day to day?
I'd say two big things: safety and travel. First, the power of the secret police was cut way back, so people weren't afraid to talk in their own homes anymore.
That's huge.
It is. And second, travel rules were loosened. For the first time in forever, you could actually apply to go visit your relatives in, say, West Germany or Austria.
So freedom became a real, tangible thing, not just an idea.
Exactly. People felt like they finally had some control over their own lives.
But all of these popular changes inside Czechoslovakia must have been making some very powerful people very nervous.
Immensely nervous. In Moscow, the Soviet leader, Leonid Brezhnev, was watching all of this and, well, he was getting paranoid.
He saw it as a threat.
A huge one. Not a military threat, but an ideological one. He was terrified that these ideas of a kinder, freer socialism would be contagious.
That it would spread.
Yes. If Czechoslovakia could make this work, then why couldn't Poland? Or Hungary? It called the entire Soviet model into question.
So their whole argument for strict control would just fall apart.
That's the heart of it. The Soviet belief was that a threat to communism in any one country was a threat to all of them, so they couldn't let it happen.
But Dubcek kept saying he was loyal to the Soviets,
Right.
to their military alliance, the Warsaw Pact.
He did. He tried so hard to walk that tightrope. He kept reassuring Brezhnev, look, these changes are just for us at home. We're still with you.
But Brezhnev didn't buy it.
He couldn't. From his point of view, allowing free speech in other parties was the first step toward Czechoslovakia leaving the alliance and joining the West.
And it wasn't just Moscow pushing back, was it?
No, the leaders in places like East Germany and Poland were panicking. They were scared that this Prague Spring would spill across their borders and give their own people ideas.
So they were actually pressuring the Soviets to do something.
They were. They were sending letters demanding that Prague bring back censorship.
Yeah.
All the diplomatic talks just failed. The two sides had completely different ideas of what socialism should be.
And that failure led directly to one of the darkest nights in the country's history, August 20th, 1968.
That's when diplomacy ended and force began. On that night, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and thousands of tanks from the Warsaw Pact just poured across the borders.
Hundreds of thousands. That's not a peacekeeping force. That's an invasion.
It was a full-scale invasion designed to be overwhelming. It happened while most people were asleep. They seized airports, government buildings, radio stations. It was the largest military operation in Europe since the end of World War II.
And people woke up to find foreign tanks in their town squares.
Exactly. A total shock and a total betrayal.
But the people didn't fight back with guns. They came up with this incredible strategy of nonviolent resistance.
I did. It was brilliant, really. Instead of violence, they used words and clever tactics.
Like what?
Well, they would just stand in front of the tanks. Not aggressively, but they'd try to talk to the soldiers. Many of these soldiers were young and confused. They'd been told they were there to stop some kind of Western invasion.
So the citizens were trying to, what, deprogram them?
In a way, yes. They were trying to show them, we're the people you're supposedly here to save, and we don't want you here. They painted slogans all over the city walls.
And they messed with the street signs, right?
That was genius. They took down the real street signs and put up fake ones. Or they'd just paint signs that said Moscow with an arrow pointing in some random direction. The tank columns had no GPS. They were completely lost.
And the radio stations.
They went underground. Broadcasters kept moving from secret location to secret location in basements or vans to keep telling people what was happening. It showed the world that this was an occupation, not a liberation.
But even with all that courage, in the end, tanks are stronger than street signs.
In the short term, yes. The Soviets moved to cut the head off the snake. Dubcek and the other main reformers were arrested.
And flown to Moscow.
Yes. And there, they were put under intense pressure to basically sign a document undoing everything.
The Moscow Protocol.
The Moscow Protocol? It was a forced surrender. It legalized the Soviet troop presence and rolled back almost all the freedoms. When Dubcek finally got back home, you could just see the defeat on his face. The dream was over.
And to justify this to the rest of the world, the Soviets created a new rule for the road.
They did. It became known as the Brezhnev Doctrine.
What did it say?
It was simple and brutal. It said that the Soviet Union had the right to use military force in any of its allied communist countries if Moscow felt that socialism was being threatened there.
So it basically erased the idea of national independence for those countries.
Completely. It was a leash. It meant that every country in the Eastern Bloc had to follow Moscow's rules, period. Any attempt to reform, to find your own path, would be crushed.
And back in Czechoslovakia, the process of crushing that spirit had its own name.
Normalization.
It sounds so harmless, so clean.
Which is what makes it so sinister. Normalization was the slow, systematic process of undoing the spring. Censorship came back with a vengeance. The vibrant, open culture was replaced by fear.
And what happened to the people who had supported the reforms?
It was a purge. Tens of thousands of teachers, writers, factory managers, anyone who had spoken up were fired from their jobs.
Just for what they believed.
Just for what they believed during those few months of freedom. The secret police were back in power. Surveillance was everywhere. It was a long, quiet, and grim 2 decades that followed.
But an idea, once it's been experienced, is hard to kill completely. Did the Prague Spring leave any kind of long-term legacy?
A powerful one. Even though it was crushed, the memory of those few months of freedom never went away. It became this moral anchor, a reminder that a better, more humane way was possible.
So the spirit of '68 was just waiting.
It was waiting. And 20 years later, in 1989, when the Soviet system finally started to weaken, that same energy was there, ready to power the Velvet Revolution, which finally brought democracy to the country for good.
So the Prague Spring, as tragic as its ending was, became a crucial chapter in that longer story.
Absolutely. It's a lesson about how deeply people want the right to decide their own future and how bravely they'll stand up for it, even against impossible odds.
The story of the Prague Spring really shows that even if freedom only lasts for a moment, the desire for it can never truly be extinguished.
That's right. Tanks can conquer a city, but they can't kill an idea that people have already come to believe in.
Good luck with your studies.